People like him need to learn that there are consequences for overstepping their boundaries. These were the venomous words Victoria Pemberton spat at Marcus Williams, a black mechanic she just publicly humiliated in front of an entire garage. She saw him as nothing more than an incompetent tradesman who dared to challenge her authority. But what happens when this same woman finds herself trapped in a life-threatening storm, completely helpless, with only one person capable of saving her life? What if that person possesses qualifications that would shatter every assumption she'd made?
The shocking truth about Marcus Williams will leave you spinkle and change how you see people forever.
This incredible story of dignity, prejudice, and redemption proves that heroes come in forms we least expect. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now. Subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The morning sun cast long shadows across Pemberton Motors' service bay as Marcus Williams adjusted his work light over the gleaming hood of a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. At 35, he moved with the precision of someone who had spent years perfecting his craft. His hands, steady and sure, worked methodically through the engine compartment. "Marcus, you've got magic in those hands," called out Jimmy Rodriguez, the garage owner, watching from across the bay. "Mrs. Henderson specifically requested you for her Audi again." Marcus smiled, wiping his hands on a clean rag. "Just doing the job right the first time, Jimmy. That's all there is to it." What Jimmy didn't know, what none of his colleagues knew, was that Marcus Williams held a master's degree in aerospace engineering from MIT. Those same hands that now fixed luxury cars had once designed components for spacecraft. But life had taken unexpected turns, and Marcus had found peace in the honest work of mechanical repair.
You know what set you apart?
Jimmy continued, leaning against the workbench. "You don't just fix the problem. You understand why it happened in the first place." Marcus nodded, his mind already analyzing the next vehicle in line. A black Bentley Continental sat in the corner, its front end showing signs of collision damage. The owner had called frantically that morning, demanding immediate attention. "That Bentley's owner coming in today?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward the luxury vehicle.
Yeah, Victoria Pemberton.
CEO's wife. Word of warning, she's particular about things. Jimmy's expression grew cautious. "Expects everything done yesterday, if you know what I mean." Marcus had dealt with demanding customers before. Patience and professionalism had always served him well. He approached the Bentley, running his trained eye over the damage. The impact had affected more than just cosmetic elements. The alignment was off, and the suspension would need careful adjustment. "This is going to need at least 3 days of work," Marcus murmured to himself, making notes on his tablet. "Maybe 4 if we want to do it right." The quality of his work spoke for itself. Other mechanics rushed through repairs, but Marcus treated each vehicle like a precision instrument. His aerospace background had taught him that cutting corners could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. As he prepared his tools, Marcus reflected on his journey. From the halls of MIT to this service bay in downtown Atlanta, his path hadn't been conventional. But every challenge had taught him something valuable about resilience, dignity, and the importance of excellence regardless of circumstances. The sound of expensive heels clicking across the concrete floor announced the arrival of his next customer. Marcus straightened his uniform shirt and prepared to greet Mrs. Pemberton with the same professionalism he showed every client. Little did he know that this interaction would test every principle he held dear about treating people with respect, regardless of how they treated him. Victoria Pemberton swept into the service bay like a force of nature, her designer handbag clutched tightly in her manicured hands. Everything about her screamed wealth and privilege, from her Hermes scarf to her Louboutin heels that clicked impatiently against the concrete floor. "Where is the person in charge?" she demanded, barely glancing at Marcus as he approached. Her assistant, a nervous young woman named Sarah, hurried behind her, clutching a tablet and struggling to keep up. "Good morning, Mrs. Pemberton. I'm Marcus Williams, and I'll be handling your vehicle's repair," Marcus said, extending his hand professionally. Victoria looked at his outstretched hand as if it were contaminated, then fixed him with a cold stare. "I asked for the person in charge, not you." "I am the senior mechanic assigned to your case, ma'am. I've already assessed the damage to your Bentley, and I can walk you through." "Walk me through." Victoria's voice rose an octave. Do you have any idea what this car is worth? This is a $300,000 vehicle, not some pickup truck you people usually work on. Marcus felt the familiar sting of casual racism but maintained his composure. Yes, ma'am, I'm quite familiar with the Continental GT. The damage to your vehicle requires precision work to ensure both safety and aesthetic quality. I estimate 3 to 4 days for complete restoration. 3 to 4 days? Victoria's face flushed red. Absolutely not. I have a charity gala tomorrow evening, and I need this car ready by then. I don't care if you have to work all night. Mrs. Pemberton, I understand the urgency, but rushing this repair could compromise the vehicle's safety systems. The impact damaged more than just the body. Don't lecture me about my own car. Victoria snapped, her voice carrying across the entire service bay. Other customers and mechanics had begun to notice the commotion. I want to speak to someone qualified. Someone who actually knows what they're doing. Sarah, the assistant, whispered urgently, Mrs. Pemberton, perhaps we should.
No, Sarah.
I will not be told by some mechanic that he knows better than I do about my schedule and my needs. Marcus took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Ma'am, I've been working on luxury vehicles for over 8 years. I assure you that your car will receive the best possible care, but safety protocols cannot be compromised. 8 years.
Victoria logued bitterly.
8 years of changing oil and rotating tires, I'm sure. This is exactly why I don't trust people like you with important matters. The shop had grown quiet. Jimmy emerged from his office, having heard the raised voices. Other customers exchanged uncomfortable glances as Victoria's words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mrs. Pemberton, Jimmy intervened, Marcus is our most skilled technician. He has certifications that... I don't want certifications, Victoria cut him off. I want results. And I want them from someone who understands the value of quality work. Marcus stood quietly, his jaw clenched but his demeanor professional. He had faced this kind of treatment before, but it never got easier. The assumption that his skill level was somehow limited by his appearance was a burden he carried daily. Ma'am, if you'd prefer another technician, that's your choice, Marcus said evenly. But I'd like you to know that every repair I complete comes with a full guarantee, and my work speaks for itself.
Victoria's eyes narrowed.
Your work? Please. Don't insult my intelligence. The tension in the service bay reached a breaking point as Victoria Pemberton's voice echoed off the concrete walls. Word had spread through the facility, and mechanics from other bays had found excuses to drift closer, witnessing the unprecedented public confrontation. You know what your problem is. Victoria pointed an accusatory finger at Marcus, her voice dripping with disdain. You think you can intimidate me with your fancy words and technical jargon. But I see right through you. Marcus maintained his professional stance, though his hands trembled slightly at his sides. Mrs. Pemberton, I'm simply trying to explain the necessary repairs to ensure your safety. My safety.
Victoria laughed harshly.
From someone who probably learned everything he knows from YouTube videos? Please. She turned to address the growing crowd of onlookers. Can you believe this? I'm being lectured about automotive engineering by someone who clearly has no business touching a vehicle worth more than his annual salary. Sarah, the assistant, tugged at Victoria's elbow. Mrs. Pemberton, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Sarah. I want everyone to hear this. Victoria's voice carried across the entire facility. This is exactly what's wrong with the service industry today. No respect, no understanding of hierarchy, no recognition of their place.
The word hit Marcus like physical blow.
Around the bay, faces showed a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and anger. Jimmy stepped forward, his face red with indignation. Mrs. Pemberton, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and treat my employee with respect. Respect. Victoria whirled on him. Respect is earned, not given. And certainly not to someone who thinks he can tell me how to manage my own schedule. She jabbed her finger toward Marcus again. People like him need to learn that there are consequences for overstepping their boundaries. Marcus felt the eyes of every person in the bay on him. The familiar weight of injustice pressed down on his shoulders, the same feeling he'd experienced in corporate boardrooms, at academic conferences, and now here, in a place where his expertise should have spoken for itself. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the internal storm, "I understand you're frustrated about the timeline. But cutting corners on safety protocols isn't something I can do, regardless of the circumstances." Safety protocols. Victoria's laughter was sharp and cruel. "Don't hide behind technical terms to mask your incompetence. If you were actually qualified, you'd find a way to meet my deadline." The crowd grew larger. Customers waiting in the lobby had ventured out to see what the commotion was about. Victoria seemed to feed off the attention, her voice growing louder and more condescending. "Let me make something crystal clear," Victoria announced to the entire assembly. "I don't take orders from mechanics. I give them. And when I tell you I need my car tomorrow, that's not a suggestion, it's a requirement." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, drawing on reserves of dignity built through years of facing prejudice. When he opened them, his voice was calm but firm. "Mrs. Pemberton, if you're not satisfied with our service approach, you're welcome to take your vehicle elsewhere. But I won't compromise safety standards, and I won't be spoken to this way."
The warden in the air like a challenge.
Victoria's face turned crimson, her composure finally cracking completely. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you speak to me like that? Do you have any idea who I am? Who my husband is? I could have this entire place shut down with one phone call." The threat sent a chill through the crowd. Jimmy stepped protectively near Marcus, but the damage was done. Victoria had made her position clear. She saw Marcus as beneath her, unworthy of basic human respect, and expected him to accept that treatment without question. Marcus straightened his shoulders, meeting her gaze directly. "Ma'am, I know exactly who you are. The question is, do you know who I am?" The service bay fell silent after Victoria Pemberton stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the concrete as she dragged Sarah toward the exit. The crowd of onlookers slowly dispersed, leaving Marcus standing alone near the damaged Bentley, his hands still trembling from the confrontation. Jimmy approached cautiously, his face a mixture of anger and concern. "Marcus, I'm sorry you had to go through that. That woman was completely out of line." Marcus nodded slowly, still processing the humiliation. "It's not the first time, Jimmy. Won't be the last." "That doesn't make it right," Jimmy said firmly. "Want me to call and tell her to take her business elsewhere?" "No," Marcus replied, surprising himself with his decision. "I'll fix her car. And I'll do it better than anyone else could." As the day wore on, Marcus found himself alone with his thoughts and the Bentley. He ran his hands along the damaged panels, his mind drifting back to a different time, a different version of himself. MIT, class of 2012.
Summa cum laude. Aerospace engineering.
He could still remember the pride on his mother's face at graduation, her tears of joy as he walked across that stage. "My son, the rocket scientist," she'd whispered. The transition from designing spacecraft components to fixing luxury cars hadn't been part of any plan. But life had a way of redirecting even the best-laid schemes. When his mother fell ill, when the medical bills mounted, when the corporate world's subtle racism became too much to bear, Marcus had found solace in the honest work of his hands. "You're more than they see," he whispered to himself, a phrase his mother had taught him years ago. "Your worth isn't determined by their limitations." Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to a photo buried deep in his gallery, himself in a clean suit, standing next to a NASA engineer at a conference, both of them smiling beside a prototype he'd helped design. That man felt like a stranger now, but the knowledge remained. He opened his toolbox with renewed purpose. Victoria Pemberton might not know who he was, but he knew, and that knowledge would guide every decision he made in the hours ahead. The Bentley's engine bay revealed the true extent of the damage. What appeared to be simple bodywork actually involved complex mechanical systems. The impact had affected the adaptive suspension, the electronic stability control, and even the advanced driver assistance systems. Marcus smiled grimly. This wasn't just about hammering out dents and touching up paint. This was about precision engineering, about understanding the intricate relationship between multiple interconnected systems. This was about the kind of work that required the exact skills Victoria had assumed he didn't possess. "Let's see what you're really made of," he murmured, not sure if he was talking to the car or to himself. As he began dismantling the damaged components, Marcus made a silent promise. He would repair this vehicle to perfection, not because Victoria Pemberton deserved it, but because excellence was a choice he made for himself, regardless of how others treated him. The sun was setting by the time Marcus had fully assessed the repairs needed. Tomorrow would bring long hours and meticulous work. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of quiet determination. Victoria Pemberton had humiliated him publicly, questioned his competence, and treated him as less than human. But in doing so, she had also set in motion events that would reveal exactly who Marcus Williams truly was. And that revelation would come sooner than anyone expected. The Atlanta Country Club's dining room buzzed with the refined chatter of the city's social elite. Victoria Pemberton sat at her usual table, surrounded by her circle of well-heeled friends, each woman draped in designer clothing that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. "Victoria, darling, you look absolutely radiant today," cooed Margaret Blackstone, adjusting her pearl necklace. "That new facial treatment is working wonders." Victoria smiled, basking in the attention. "Thank you, Margaret. Though I must say, my day started with quite the ordeal. You wouldn't believe the incompetence I encountered this morning." "Oh, do tell," urged Patricia Walsh, leaning forward with the eager anticipation of someone hungry for gossip. Victoria straightened in her chair, preparing to recount her morning triumph. "Well, you know my Bentley was damaged in that little fender bender last week? I took it to Pemberton Motors, Charles's dealership of course, and you won't believe the audacity I encountered."
Audacity.
Margaret raised an eyebrow. "The mechanic, this young black man, actually had the nerve to tell me he couldn't have my car ready for tomorrow's gala."
Can you imagine? Victoria's voice dripped with indignation.
"As if I don't understand my own schedule better than some tradesman." Patricia gasped dramatically. "How absolutely presumptuous. What did you do?" "I put him in his place, naturally." Victoria took a sip of her champagne, savoring both the drink and the memory. "I made it very clear that there are consequences for overstepping boundaries. People like that need to understand their position in society." "Good for you," Margaret nodded approvingly. "These days, everyone thinks they can speak to their betters as equals. It's refreshing to see someone maintain proper standards." Victoria preened under the praise. This was her world, a place where her husband's wealth and influence translated into unquestioned social authority. Here, among women who had never worked a day in their lives, she was respected, admired, even envied. "The problem," Victoria continued, warming to her theme, "is that society has become too permissive. We've forgotten that some people need guidance, need to be reminded of their place. That mechanic actually looked me in the eye and questioned my decisions."
How shocking.
Patricia exclaimed, though her eyes gleamed with the pleasure of hearing about someone else's misfortune. "Exactly. But don't worry, I handled it appropriately. By the time I left, everyone in that garage understood exactly who they were dealing with." Sarah, Victoria's assistant, shifted uncomfortably in her chair at the edge of the group, but said nothing. She had witnessed the morning's confrontation and felt deeply uncomfortable about her employer's behavior, but her job depended on keeping such thoughts to herself. Victoria raised her champagne glass. "To maintaining standards, ladies. Someone has to." The women toasted, their crystal glasses chiming together in a sound that perfectly captured their world: beautiful, expensive, and utterly hollow. As the afternoon wore on, Victoria felt completely vindicated in her actions. This was her domain, where her behavior was not only accepted but celebrated. Little did she know that before the day was over, she would desperately need the help of the very man she had humiliated. The next morning found Marcus in the service bay before dawn, the Bentley's hood already open, tools laid out with military precision. The early hours provided him with quiet focus, away from the usual bustle of the garage's daily operations. Marcus had spent the previous evening researching the Bentley's specific systems, cross-referencing repair manuals with his own knowledge of advanced engineering principles. What he found confirmed his initial assessment: this wasn't a simple bodywork job. "Morning, Marcus," Jimmy called out as he arrived with coffee.
You're here early.
"Wanted to get a head start," Marcus replied, not looking up from the engine compartment. "This repair is more complex than it appears." Jimmy peered over his shoulder. "Looks like straightforward collision damage to me." That's what most people would think, Marcus said, pointing to a seemingly minor component. But see this sensor cluster? The impact damaged the vehicle's entire adaptive system network. If I just hammered out the dents and painted over the scratches, this car would be a death trap at highway speeds. Seriously? Marcus nodded. The average mechanic might miss it. They'd focus on making it look good and send the customer on their way. But when those systems fail, and they will fail, someone could die.
Jimmy whistled low.
Mrs. Pemberton has no idea how lucky she is to have you working on this. She made it clear yesterday that she doesn't consider herself lucky at all, Marcus replied with a wry smile. As the morning progressed, other customers began arriving. Word of the previous day's confrontation had spread, and several regular clients made a point of stopping by Marcus's bay. "Marcus, I heard about yesterday," said Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman whose Audi he serviced regularly. "I want you to know that woman doesn't speak for all of us. You've always treated my car like it was your own." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I appreciate that." Dr. Patel, a cardiologist whose BMW Marcus had been maintaining for 3 years, approached with similar sentiments. "That behavior was absolutely unacceptable, Marcus. You have more integrity in your little finger than people like that have in their entire body." Each conversation reinforced something Marcus had always believed: excellence speaks for itself. The quality of his work, the care he took with every repair, the respect he showed every customer regardless of their attitude toward him, these things mattered more than any insult or humiliation. By midday, Marcus had completed the complex electronic system repairs and moved on to the mechanical components. Each part was cleaned, calibrated, and tested before installation. This wasn't just about fixing Victoria Pemberton's car, it was about maintaining his own standards of excellence.
You know what set you apart, Marcus.
Jimmy observed, watching him work. You don't just fix problems.
You prevent future ones.
Marcus smiled, adjusting a suspension component with micrometer precision. My mother always said, excellence is a habit, not an act. If you're going to do something, do it right. As the sun began to set, Marcus stepped back to survey his work. The Bentley looked pristine, but more importantly, it was mechanically perfect. Every system had been tested, every component verified. This vehicle was now safer than when it had rolled off the assembly line. Victoria Pemberton would get her car back on schedule, repaired to a standard that far exceeded her expectations. But she would receive this gift not because she deserved it, but because Marcus Williams refused to compromise his principles, even when faced with the worst humanity had to offer. He had no way of knowing that in just a few hours, those principles would be tested in ways he never could have imagined. Victoria Pemberton slid behind the wheel of her newly repaired Bentley, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping the leather steering wheel. The car purred to life with the smooth precision she expected from her luxury vehicles, though she was too prideful to acknowledge the quality of Marcus's work. The weather service issued a severe storm warning for tonight, Mrs. Pemberton, Sarah said nervously from the passenger seat, scrolling through alerts on her tablet. Perhaps we should consider postponing. Absolutely not, Victoria cut her off sharply. The Montgomery Foundation Gala is the social event of the season. Half the city's elite will be there, and I refuse to miss it because of a little rain.
Sarah glanced at the darkening sky overhead.
The meteorologist said possible tornado conditions. Sarah, please. I've driven in storms before. This car cost more than most people's houses. It can handle a bit of weather. As they pulled onto the highway leading toward the exclusive Riverside Country Club, the first drops of rain began spattering against the windshield. Victoria turned up the classical music and pressed harder on the accelerator, determined to arrive at the gala in style. Within 20 minutes, those first innocent drops had transformed into a torrential downpour. The highway stretched ahead through increasingly rural terrain, lined with tall trees that swayed ominously in the growing wind. Mrs. Pemberton, maybe we should pull over until this passes, Sarah suggested, her voice tight with anxiety as lightning illuminated the storm clouds above. Don't be ridiculous. We're already running late thanks to that incompetent mechanic taking so long with the repairs.
Victoria Zubri blinded her to the mounting danger.
She had spent her entire adult life insulated from real consequences, protected by wealth and privilege from the harsh realities that affected ordinary people. The idea that nature might not respect her social status was simply inconceivable. The storm intensified rapidly, transforming from heavy rain to a violent tempest that reduced visibility to mere yards. Wind gusts rocked the Bentley, and even Victoria began to feel the first stirrings of concern. "Perhaps we should," she began, just as a massive tree branch, torn loose by the wind, crashed down across the road ahead. Victoria slammed on the brakes, the Bentley's advanced safety systems preventing a collision but leaving them stranded on a deserted stretch of highway. The fallen branch blocked both lanes completely, its massive trunk too large to drive around. "Oh no," Sarah whispered, staring at the obstacle ahead. Victoria tried to reverse, but another fallen tree had blocked the road behind them during their brief stop. They were trapped on an isolated section of highway, surrounded by towering trees that groaned and swayed dangerously in the hurricane-force winds. "This is impossible," Victoria muttered, reaching for her phone. "I'll call the highway department. They'll clear this immediately." But when she looked at her phone, the screen showed no signal bars. The storm had knocked out the cell towers in the area, leaving them completely cut off from the outside world. For the first time in her privileged life, Victoria Pemberton found herself truly helpless, trapped in a situation where her wealth and social status were utterly meaningless. The storm raged around them, indifferent to her importance, her schedule, or her demands.
What do we do now?
Sarah asked quietly. Victoria stared at the fallen trees blocking their path, realization slowly dawning that she was facing a problem money couldn't solve and influence couldn't overcome. 2 hours passed as Victoria and Sarah sat trapped in the Bentley, watching the storm rage around them. The wind howled like a living thing, driving rain against the windows in sheets so thick they could barely see beyond the hood of the car. Victoria had tried everything her privileged life had taught her to do in a crisis. She'd attempted to call her husband's assistant, her personal driver, even the mayor's office. But the phone showed the same merciless message: no service. "I can't believe this is happening," Victoria muttered for the 20th time, her usual composure cracking under the pressure of genuine helplessness. "Charles will send someone looking for us when we don't arrive at the gala." Sarah glanced at her employer with growing concern. Victoria's face had gone pale, and her hands shook slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. This was a woman who had never faced a problem she couldn't buy her way out of, and the reality of their situation was beginning to sink in. "Mrs. Pemberton, maybe if we tried walking back to in this storm?"
Are you insane? Victoria's voice rose with panic.
"We could be killed by falling trees or struck by lightning." As if summoned by her words, a massive lightning bolt struck somewhere nearby, followed by thunder so loud it shook the car. Both women jumped, and Victoria let out a small cry of fear. "There has to be someone we can call," Victoria said desperately, scrolling through her contacts again. "Someone who can help us." Sarah hesitated, then spoke carefully. "What about roadside assistance? For the car, I mean." "I tried that already. The automated system says all drivers are responding to other emergencies." Victoria's voice was beginning to sound frantic. "This is exactly why I pay for premium services. They're supposed to be available when I need them." Another hour passed. The storm showed no signs of abating, and darkness was falling rapidly. Victoria had never experienced true fear before, but now it crept through her like ice water. "Wait," Sarah said suddenly, looking at her tablet. "What about the mechanic who worked on your car? He would know the systems better than anyone, and maybe—" "Absolutely not." Victoria's response was immediate and vehement. "I will not call that person for help."
Iderater City Roll Night.
But as another lightning strike illuminated the chaos outside, Victoria's resolve began to waver. She was cold, frightened, and completely out of options. The comfortable world of country clubs and charity galas seemed impossibly far away. "Mrs. Pemberton," Sarah said gently, "pride won't keep us safe out here." Victoria stared at the blocked road ahead, her mind racing. Everything in her upbringing, her social conditioning, her sense of superiority rebelled against the idea of asking Marcus Williams for help. But as thunder crashed overhead and the wind threatened to tear the trees down around them, she began to realize that sometimes survival matters more than pride. "Find his number," she whispered finally, the words barely audible over the storm. Sarah quickly searched through the dealership's contact information, locating Marcus's emergency service line. She handed Victoria the phone, their eyes meeting in the dim light of the car's interior. Victoria's finger hovered over the call button, her entire worldview crashing down around her like the storm outside. She was about to ask for help from the very man she had publicly humiliated just hours earlier. Marcus Williams was at home, reviewing engineering journals over a quiet dinner, when his emergency service phone rang. The number on the display surprised him. It was Victoria Pemberton's assistant. His first instinct was to let it go to voicemail, but his professional ethics wouldn't allow it. "Marcus Williams Emergency Service," he answered. "Please." The voice that came through the line was so different from the imperious tone he'd heard that morning that he almost didn't recognize it. Victoria Pemberton sounded small, frightened, and desperate. "We need help." Marcus set down his fork, immediately alert. "What's your location and what's the nature of the emergency?" "We're trapped on Highway 285, about 15 miles past the Riverside exit. Trees fell across the road in both directions during the storm. The car is fine, but we can't move, and there's no cell service except for this one spot where we're getting a weak signal." Through the phone, Marcus could hear the storm raging, wind howling, rain pounding, and the occasional crack of thunder. Weather reports had been warning about severe conditions all day. "Are you and your passenger injured?" he asked, his training taking over despite their history. "No, we're not hurt. But we've been here for 3 hours, and the emergency services said they can't reach us until morning at the earliest. All their crews are responding to other calls." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing the situation. Highway 285 in storm conditions would be dangerous even for emergency vehicles. The area Victoria described was particularly isolated, surrounded by old-growth trees that became deadly projectiles in high winds.
Please. Victoria's voice cracked slightly.
"I know what happened this morning was. I know I was wrong. But we're scared, and you're the only person who knows this car well enough to help us." The admission hung in the air between them. Marcus looked out his window at the storm battering his neighborhood. Every rational part of his mind told him to call the authorities and let them handle it. Victoria Pemberton had made her feelings about him crystal clear. But as another gust of wind shook his house, Marcus thought about 2 women trapped alone on a deserted highway in life-threatening conditions. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "Your character isn't defined by how people treat you, son. It's defined by how you treat them, especially when they don't deserve it." "Stay in the vehicle," Marcus said finally. "Keep the engine running for heat, but crack the windows slightly to prevent carbon monoxide buildup. I'm coming to get you."
"You're coming."
Victoria's relief was palpable. But the storm. "I have a truck equipped for emergency response, and I know those roads well. It'll take me about 45 minutes to reach you in these conditions." "Thank you," Victoria whispered. "Thank you so much." Marcus hung up and immediately began preparing. He loaded his truck with emergency equipment: winches, chains, flares, first aid supplies, and tools. His vehicle was a modified heavy-duty pickup with reinforced tires and emergency lighting, built for exactly this kind of situation. As he pulled out of his driveway into the storm, Marcus reflected on the irony. Hours ago, Victoria Pemberton had questioned his competence and treated him as less than human. Now, her life might depend on the very skills she had dismissed. The drive was treacherous. Trees were down everywhere, power lines sparked dangerously in the street, and visibility was nearly zero. But Marcus pressed forward, guided by something stronger than logic, the simple human obligation to help others in need, regardless of their past actions. He had no idea that this night would reveal not just his character, but the true depth of his expertise in ways that no one, especially Victoria Pemberton, could have imagined. Marcus's headlights cut through the darkness as he navigated the storm-damaged highway, dodging fallen branches and debris. When he finally spotted the trapped Bentley, his heart sank. The situation was worse than Victoria had described. Both trees were massive oaks, and one had partially crushed the guardrail, making the road impassable in both directions. He pulled up behind the Bentley and stepped into the howling wind, immediately soaked by the driving rain. Victoria and Sarah emerged from their car, both looking bedraggled and frightened, a stark contrast to the imperious woman who had confronted him that morning.
"Thank God you're here," Victoria called out over the storm.
"Can you move these trees?" Marcus surveyed the scene with his engineer's eye, calculating weights, angles, and structural integrity. Not safely, he said. But I might be able to create a path around them. The problem is the embankment. It's too steep and unstable for normal vehicles. Then we're still trapped, Sarah said, her voice barely audible above the wind. Not necessarily. Marcus returned to his truck and retrieved a complex-looking device.
This is a terrain analysis scanner.
I need to check if the ground can support your vehicle's weight if we modify the suspension settings. Victoria stared at the sophisticated equipment in confusion.
You carry terrain analysis équipement.
Among other things. Marcus began taking readings, his movements precise and methodical. The device beeped and displayed data that would have been meaningless to most people, but Marcus interpreted it instantly. The good news is the ground will hold, he announced. The bad news is we'll need to recalibrate your car's entire suspension system to handle the extreme angle and surface conditions. It's going to require accessing the vehicle's core engineering protocols.
Can you do that?
Victoria asked, genuine respect creeping into her voice for the first time. Marcus looked at her steadily.
Mrs. Pemberton, your Bentley Continental GT use en adaptive air suspension system integrated with electronic stability control and predictive terrain response algorithm.
The modifications I need to make require understanding the mathematical relationships between suspension geometry, weight distribution, and traction coefficients under variable load conditions.
Victoria's mouth fell open.
The technical language was far beyond anything she'd expected from a garage mechanic. To safely navigate that embankment, Marcus continued, connecting a laptop to the Bentley's diagnostic port, I need to temporarily reprogram the suspension to extend beyond factory parameters, recalibrate the differential settings, and modify the torque distribution algorithms. One miscalculation and the car could roll. His fingers flew across the keyboard, lines of complex code reflecting in his focused eyes. I'm essentially redesigning your vehicle stability systems in real time, using principles of mechanical engineering, computer science, and physics. How do you know how to do all this? Victoria whispered, watching in amazement as Marcus worked. Marcus paused, looking up from the computer. Because before I became a mechanic, Mrs. Pemberton, I spent 5 years designing guidance systems for spacecraft at NASA. I hold a master's degree in aerospace engineering from MIT, graduated summa cum laude, and I've published papers on adaptive control systems in peer-reviewed journals.
The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow.
This man, whom she had dismissed, humiliated, and treated as intellectually inferior, possessed qualifications that far exceeded her own education, despite her privileged upbringing. The suspension modifications are complete, Marcus announced, closing his laptop. But I need to guide your vehicle manually through the terrain. The margin for error is essentially zero. For the next 30 minutes, Marcus stood in the driving rain, directing Victoria through a path that required precision measured in inches. His calculations proved flawless. The modified Bentley handled the extreme conditions perfectly, emerging safely on the other side of the blockage. When they reached stable ground, Victoria sat in her car, staring at Marcus through the windshield as he packed his equipment. The man she had insulted and degraded had just saved her life using skills she never could have imagined he possessed. How? She whispered to herself. How could I have been so wrong? The next morning, Victoria Pemberton stood in the service bay of Pemberton Motors, her usual confidence replaced by something she rarely experienced, genuine humility. Marcus was at his workstation, organizing his tools with the same methodical precision she now recognized as the mark of a true professional. Mr. Williams, she began tentatively. Could I speak with you privately? Marcus looked up, noting the dramatic change in her demeanor. Gone was the imperious tone, the dismissive attitude, the casual cruelty. In their place was something that looked suspiciously like respect. Of course, Mrs. Pemberton. Victoria took a deep breath, struggling with words that didn't come naturally to someone of her background. I owe you an apology. Not just for yesterday morning, but for every assumption I made about you, every word I spoke, and every thought I had about your capabilities. Marcus remained quiet, allowing her to continue. I spent my entire life believing that education, intelligence, and worth were somehow connected to social class and appearance. Last night, you demonstrated levels of expertise that I couldn't even comprehend, let alone duplicate. Her voice cracked slightly. You saved our lives using knowledge I didn't even know existed. Mrs. Pemberton. Please let me finish. Victoria raised her hand. I humiliated you publicly, questioned your competence, and treated you as if you were less than human. And despite all of that, when I needed help, you risked your own safety to rescue two people who hadn't shown you basic decency. She paused, seeming to gather her courage. I want to understand how someone with your qualifications ended up working as a mechanic. Not because there's anything wrong with being a mechanic, but because I need to understand how blind I've been to the reality around me. Marcus set down his tools and considered his response carefully. My mother was diagnosed with cancer 7 years ago. The medical bills were overwhelming, even with insurance. I left my aerospace position to care for her and took whatever work I could find to pay for her treatment. Did she?
Victoria began softly.
She passed 3 years ago. By then, I discovered that I genuinely enjoyed the work. There's something satisfying about fixing problems with your hands, helping people directly, and being part of a community. Victoria nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I've made a terrible mistake, and I need to make it right. I want to publicly acknowledge what happened yesterday and your extraordinary qualifications. I want to ensure that everyone knows who you really are. Mrs. Pemberton, that's not necessary. Yes, it is. It's necessary for me, and it's necessary for everyone who witnessed my behavior yesterday.
Victoria's voice grew stronger.
I'm going to write a letter to the local newspaper, and I'm going to speak at the Chamber of Commerce meeting next week. People deserve to know that they have a NASA-trained engineer working right here in our community. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I appreciate the gesture, Mrs. Pemberton. But I don't do this work for recognition or praise. I do it because it's who I am. I know, Victoria replied. That's what makes you a better person than I am. But everyone in this city needs to understand what I failed to see, that competence, intelligence, and character aren't determined by appearance or social status. They're determined by actions. She extended her hand formally. Mr. Williams, would you accept my sincere apology and my commitment to do better? Marcus looked at her outstretched hand for a moment, then shook it firmly. Apology accepted, Mrs. Pemberton. We all have room to grow. 1 week later, the Pemberton Motors service bay buzzed with unusual activity. Local news crews had arrived, drawn by Victoria Pemberton's public letter to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and her passionate speech at the Chamber of Commerce, where she had revealed Marcus Williams's true credentials and acknowledged her own prejudicial behavior. I never expected this much attention, Marcus told Jimmy as they watched reporters setting up equipment near his workstation. You deserve it, man. People need to know they've got a rocket scientist fixing their cars, Jimmy grinned. Though I have to ask, are you thinking about going back to aerospace? Marcus smiled, running his hand along the hood of a customer's Mercedes. You know, I've been thinking about that. Maybe there's a way to do both. Use my engineering background to revolutionize automotive repair, maybe teach classes, share knowledge. Victoria Pemberton approached, looking nervous but determined.
Monsieur Williams?
The reporters are ready when you are. Actually, Mrs. Pemberton, I'd like you to be part of this interview. What happened between us is important, but what we learned from it matters more. The interview went well. Marcus spoke eloquently about his background, his mother's influence, and his philosophy of treating every job with excellence regardless of recognition. Victoria, with genuine emotion, described her own transformation and the lessons she'd learned about prejudice and assumption. What I discovered, Victoria told the camera, is that dignity and competence aren't privileges to be granted based on someone's appearance or social status. They're inherent human qualities that I was too blind to see. After the cameras left, Marcus returned to his work. A young black teenager who had been watching from the parking lot approached hesitantly.
Excuse-me, sir?
I saw the news story. I'm thinking about studying engineering, but my guidance counselor said I should consider something more realistic. Marcus set down his tools and gave the young man his full attention.
What is your name, son? Jérôme, sir. Jérôme, let me tell you something my mother taught me.
Your worth isn't determined by other people's limitations. If you want to study engineering, then study engineering. The world needs more people who aren't afraid to reach for excellence. He pulled out his phone and showed Jerome the old photo of himself with a NASA engineer. This was me 8 years ago, designing spacecraft components. Today, I'm using those same skills to help people with their cars. Both jobs matter, both require excellence, and both deserve respect.
Jérôme sighs with Ned.
Do you think, could you maybe tell me about college programs sometime? Absolutely. Come back Saturday morning, and we'll talk about everything from applications to career paths. As the teenager walked away with renewed hope, Marcus reflected on the events of the past week. Victoria Pemberton had learned to see beyond her prejudices, the community had gained new respect for the dignity of work, and a young man had found inspiration to pursue his dreams. Sometimes, he thought, the most important repairs weren't to cars at all, they were to the human heart, where assumptions and prejudices could be replaced with understanding and respect. Marcus Williams returned to his work, carrying himself with the quiet dignity of a man who knew his worth wasn't defined by others' opinions, but by his own commitment to excellence and humanity. Dear friend, this powerful story reminds us that every person we encounter carries hidden depths, dreams, and extraordinary capabilities that deserve our respect. In our daily lives, we often make snap judgments based on appearances, professions, or social status, missing the incredible human beings right in front of us. Marcus Williams represents countless individuals who face prejudice while quietly demonstrating excellence, dignity, and compassion. Let's challenge ourselves to look beyond surface assumptions and treat every person with the respect they inherently deserve. Your mechanic might be a former engineer, your server might be a published poet, your janitor might hold advanced degrees. Everyone has a story worth honoring. If this story touched your heart and opened your eyes to the importance of dignity and respect for all people, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can spread more stories that celebrate human worth and inspire positive change in our communities.